Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Breakthrough 7.0, brought to you by HiQA. Today, we will be looking at how you can break down the walls between quality and manufacturing with HiQA's version 7.0 breakthrough release. Before we get started, I would like to mention a couple of housekeeping items. We invite you to ask questions throughout the presentation by typing in your Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, as your phone is muted during the session. We will address the questions received at the end of the presentation. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available in a few days for playback. I would now like to introduce you to our presenter, Chris Mendocino, Vice President of Product for HiQA. And with that, I will turn the floor over to Chris.
Hey, thanks, Lisa. All right, welcome everybody. This is a webinar that we're very excited about here. And it looks like there's a lot of people that were also excited about this because it's a pretty well-attended webinar. So let's go into it. So today we're going to cover some of the new feature functions within version 7, but we're also going to share a couple of kind of positioning points about what our vision is for the version 7 and later on through the year of 2022, and why version 7 is such a pivotal turning point for HiQA as a company and as a product. There's some kind of revolutionary new things that are in here. So with that, I'll just say briefly that we're taking a bit of a different approach to this particular rollout. Typically, we do these What's New webinars after the formal release. We're actually doing this a few weeks before the formal release in this case, because it's something that we want to start educating our customers on and prospects that are in the pipeline that are reviewing our product and such. And so because of that, we're showing an early preview of the product. So it's not fully cooked yet, but it's enough where we can walk you through and help you understand the concepts. And we think you're going to be just as excited as we are with this. So we're calling this, well, I put a tagline here, next level for quality and manufacturing teams, because one of the huge focuses that we have for this year is one, we're moving from just a ballooning product or an inspection management tool into kind of a bit of a different position. So QMS focused on inspection and document management, okay? Or submission management might be another way to say that. So traditionally to date, you've had inspection manager where you can do auto balloon prints and build detailed inspection plans that are all contextualized to the operations and so on. And then do data collection from the shop floor. We had SBC. That's really focused around inspection tools. And we had a whole reporting engine to report on that inspection data. But what we're moving to, and we'll show this today, we're going to do a live demo portion after we kind of lay the groundwork here. What we're moving into is more of a comprehensive document management tool. All right. And that's kind of a new aspect of the system. And it's getting into project management as well as that document management piece. Okay, so I'll talk more on that in just a minute. The other major focus within 2022 is this idea of collaboration between quality and manufacturing. All right, historically, companies have thought of us as a quality system exclusively, and so we see this a lot where companies buy the ballooning tools and the inspection management tools and stuff for their quality people. But what we're starting to push more, and because we see the way that our customers are engaging with our tools, is we're pushing this idea that this isn't just for quality. This is a collaborative environment that allows quality manufacturing engineers to work together in ways that weren't really possible before, or at least they were more difficult before and now having a centralized system that contains the inspection plan and all of the tools to build a plan per operation and to set sampling rules based on conditions and feedback from the process and such. That's really a collaborative process between quality and manufacturing engineers. Okay, so much so I'll share a quick little kind of story that happened a couple of weeks ago. There's a company that we were working with out in the UK, who I won't say who it is, but there's a company that we were working with where they initially bought 2 seats of our software for their quality engineers, and because they were in that mindset, thinking of this as a ballooning tool. And then when they upgraded to this, what we call PQP, that's the document management side, we'll talk about in a couple of minutes here. When they upgraded to that, they upgraded and bought extra seats of even the core package too, to share with the manufacturing engineers so that quality and manufacturing could work together instead of just manufacturing sharing some information and quality transcribing the data into the software. And so they even physically are moving their office space around to put quality and manufacturing at the center of the offices, in like with their desks right next to each other, so that they can work together inside this product and streamline their processes. So that was a real exciting piece of feedback to hear. And the third focus point for this year is cross-company collaboration as well. All right, so not just collaboration with your internal teams, quality and manufacturing, and injecting these concepts or infusing them together inside of one company, but also allowing you to collaborate with your suppliers and your customers through a connected platform. All right, so those are some of the visionary concepts that we're focused on for this year, just to lay some of that groundwork. As far as functional updates within version 7, we'll just highlight the 3 main areas of this. So one of them, this is a little bit tangential to the topics that I just brought up, but it is a major feature that we want to highlight with version 7. So tabulated drawings automation. This is something that came up a lot with medical companies, aerospace companies and such, where you'll have a tabulated drawing that's got a table for a whole bunch of different part number instances. And creating all the unique inspection plans for that is quite cumbersome. And so we've created some really cool tools that we'll show in the demo today for how to automatically build those out. The next one is PQP, the production quality planning. So this is where we're getting into that advanced document management, project management tool set. So this can be literally for any company of any size, because if you think about the small mom and pop shops, the mid-sized companies, everybody's got some sort of submission package. Everybody has some sort of documentation that they need to track and have, review process, approvals, signatures of some sort, whether it's just an FAI, a lot inspection report, material certs, or even all the way up through PPAP, like with your process flow, PFMEA, control plans, gauge R&R, all of those different types of forms. No matter how sophisticated it is, there is this concept of project management within quality around the documentation pieces. And that's something that we're hitting on really heavily with some revolutionary tools that we're excited to show you guys here. And the third functional area that we're going to highlight today is part categories. And that is a concept of templatizing settings and preferences. This is something that's been requested by our customer base for quite some time now. This idea of you have specific reports for report templates for a particular customer, or or for certain customers, they have defined criticality as critical features. Other customers use different terminology. They'll say critical to quality, or they call them key features, or whatever it is. And so you want custom designators. You want different AQL sampling rules. You want all kinds of different settings or preferences per part that you're running. And so we've created this concept of part categories where you're able to templatize kind of, templates of settings and preferences, so that when you create parts, all of your settings and configuration for that part kind of click into place automatically. So I want to show you how those tools play out. Okay. And so all of this really gets into this concept of what we call high QA 360. Okay, and that's this idea of creating that highly collaborative platform to allow companies and teams to collaborate internally, as well as you can see to the left and right here with your customers and suppliers. Okay, so just wanted to show you some of the new branding, some of the new imagery that's coming from our marketing teams to emphasize this concept. All right, so with that as our foundation, let's jump into a live demo. All right, let me switch over. So I want to start today with the tabulated drawings, and then we'll get into the document management tools and such that we're talking about here. So for those of you that work with tabulated, this will make sense right away, what you're looking at here. But basically, what's happening is instead of having dimensions that are, 2 inches or 5 degrees or whatever they are, some of these dimensions on here are letters, characters that are variables. Okay. And so the way this works is this dimension is referencing a table down here where dimension 2, it's A. So that means there's an A max and a min. So there's like a upper and lower limit for that value, depending on which instance of the part number that it is. Okay, so this is a bit of a pain in the neck for companies to put together. It's really nice for engineering teams because the design engineers just have to have one drawing that they make, and then they just update the tabulated table. But when you're talking about inspection plans, now you have to have a unique inspection plan for each one of these variations. So the tool set works like this. What I've done, I've kind of done some of the groundwork for setting up this part. I'll show you what we did. We do our ballooning just like we normally would. We get our dimensions down here. And I checked this box. This is a new box to say that this is a master part. Okay. Now, when you check that box on, you get some new tabs. There's this tabulated instances, which we'll get to in a minute. And I've got tabulated drawings here in my dropdown. Okay. So when I open tabulated drawings, now what I want to do is import this table here and start mapping everything. Okay. Now, real quick before we do that, I'll show one more thing that I set up here. Each dimension, what we're doing is we're actually tagging the dimension. So if you look at dimension 1 here, right? So dimension 1 has, I checked it as a tabulated dim, and I set the parameter for it. Okay. So when you say set parameter, you say, great. So this is a nominal parameter of A1. Okay. It's because this dimension is getting its nominal value from A1. And so it doesn't matter what we put in here for a nominal. We have our tolerancing and all the other details about it. But this particular detail or aspect of the requirement is going to vary from part to part. Okay. So simple tool to map all that out. And now we can go into our tabulated drawings area. All right. And I'm going to say extract from drawing. I'm going to continue. All right. And that selects our tool up here that we have to extract this table. Okay. So I'm just going to window select that table. It's going to extract it like so. All right. And it brings that in just like this. Okay. Now, I mentioned this is an early release, so there's a little bit of cleanup I'll do here. I'm going to actually delete both of these rows because we don't need them. Okay, so I get to define here the tabulated parameters are placed in row 1. Okay, so this is D, P, J, A, this will be 1. And then there's A, min, max, and HK, right? And then our part instances are in column A. Okay, so this is all I need. So I verify this real quick, make sure that the data looks good. All right, we'll create the parameters like so. We'll say yes. And it just created all of those unique parameters for the various part instances, okay, with all the different values. And you can see here, dim quantity. Those are the dims that were mapped to each of those parameter values. So dim 1 was mapped for nominal, okay, for A1. Dim 2 was mapped for upper tolerance for A max, okay. So what's going to happen now is I've got this table here of all these part numbers, and I want to say create these instances, and it's going to create unique part numbers through the whole system with those unique inspection plans with all the variables kind of put into the bill of characteristics. All right, so we'll just say create, we'll say yes. It's going to run through and create all of those unique part numbers as we discussed there. Okay, so this is a fairly unprecedented tool. We haven't really seen anything else like this in our competitive analysis that we're aware of. And so this is revolutionary in that aspect. And for medical companies, we think this is going to be really big. We've got a number of early adopters for this that have given some really positive feedback on it. And we're excited about bringing this further into the market. There's a whole range of scenarios that we've encountered. We did a whole bunch of testing with this against different scenarios, as I've suggested, different types of tables, different types of parameters that might be mapped, and so on. And we've covered a huge portion of that that we've seen, and we're continuing to advance it too for more complex tabulated drawings. So definitely reach out to our teams if this is something you're interested in, because we're still continuing to look for examples of different types of prints to make sure that we're supporting as much as we can of what's out there. Okay, so just to close the loop here, you'll see if I go to my open repository, you'll see that now those part numbers were made as individual records in the system. Okay, you can see there's duplicates of them because I had done this last night as well. But if I go to the tabulated tab here, you can see these are all my tabulated masters that I can keep track of in one area like this. Okay, so super great tool. It also factors for revision control because you can rev the master and then create, rev Bs of all of the instances as the master goes through revision changes. All right, so super cool tool. A lot of power and automation there that we're very excited about. Okay, let's get into the other areas here. All right, so I'm going to pull up another demo part here. And so let's talk about the PQP side of things. So this is one that's been getting a lot of attention. It's this PQP records tab up here. And so I did notice that a lot of the people that were on the call today on the webinar and registered are new, like an overwhelming percentage were new companies. And so just to give a little bit of context of what's happening here from the UI if you're new to this. So what we're looking at here is a drawing like we had with the tabulated instances, but this is a specific job record. We're at the job level right now. So we have parts, we have jobs, we have revs of parts, we have lots and operations. So there's a whole hierarchy that we can map throughout the through the database, the way that it's set up. Okay, so with that, when I'm planning for a job, I plan out all the inspection requirements, okay? And I also plan those out per operation here, okay? So I can say op 10 is a size cut operation. I'm checking these features. So this is one of the areas we were talking about from a collaboration standpoint, is that if manufacturing engineers have a license of this, right? You're not just using it for quality teams, but you're engaging other departments in the facility, in the organization, then manufacturing engineers can come in after quality does the initial ballooning. They review the core list of requirements. Manufacturing comes in and just starts grouping requirements and says add operation, boop, and groups them according to whatever the manufacturing process is going to be. Okay. And then typically there's some negotiation that sort of goes on, or there's some planning that occurs where you're setting the sampling rules per operation. So if we go and look at something like this, so if I look at this drilling op, right, I have this balloon drawing that's contextualized to this particular operation, okay? And I could set the specific sampling rules for the features at this op, the specific gauge categories, and even like SBC targets. So like target CPK, PPK values, all of that gets defined here, okay, in this level. All right, now that's a little bit different for some companies to think about, because as we're going to get into the document management side, something that comes up is they say, oh, well, I would go to the control plan, or I would go to the P flow to kind of build these concepts or build these object types, right? And the way we've designed the system is you're working on the part to define all the operations, all of the requirements and the details around those requirements in this one kind of united area of the product, right, under the drawings tab, because it's all in reference to this drawing. And then that information collectively feeds all of the documents and stuff that we want to output through that, okay? So a bit of a mentality shift for some companies, depending on how you work today. And but once, in our experience so far, once companies grasp this, it has a huge impact on the organization overall as far as streamlining the processes here. Okay, so we've got our part, we've got our manufacturing ops, and that's all broken down, right? So the new side of this with PQP records is I go in here, and now I'm in my document management arena, so to speak, right? So for this, I want to break this down because we've done some specific webinars on this. So if you're new to HiQA, you can go back through our channel on YouTube and you can see some webinars where we specifically talked about this area of the product because it is fairly extensive. But to kind of break it down today relatively quickly, we'll kind of provide some highlight. So the way to think about this, I'm going to pull up one of our articles that we have here. So this is an article that that I happen to put together actually for a PQP overview. All right, because we are building all of the documentation and such for our customers who are soon coming on board with this. We have a number of early adopters and such that have been working with it for some time, and but we know many more are waiting for the formal release. And so an easy way to look at this here is, if I open this up, there's this concept of components in the PQP side, all right, because we're planning for the documents that we need to produce, okay, and we're also managing their life, the life cycle of the individual documents. And so to do that, there's really, we'll bypass on the pink one today, but really there's three main ones. There's index templates, dynamic reports, and workflows. Okay, so those three, what we call components, are all able to be templates in your system. So you'll have like a library of these three types of components, and they're all configurable. Okay, so we have designers for the index templates, designers for the dynamic reports, designers for the workflows. Okay, and it's these tools to be able to configure these objects. All right, so let's start with an index. What is that? The other two are probably fairly obvious, but an index, the idea here is something like this, where when I have a job, I've got all my inspection requirements like we talked about, but then I also have what we're calling submission or document requirements, okay? So an index kind of sits there with individual line items. Those are my document requirements. And I attach to each one of those a dynamic report. Okay, each dynamic report has its own workflow associated with it to manage its life cycle. Okay, now this is to account for the fact that there's tons of quality documents that need approvals or electronic signatures, or they need supplementary information applied to them that isn't necessarily housed inside of the inspection manager database, right? So let's take a look at how this works. Now we've got that sort of as a foundation to our understanding of this. So what we're looking at here, we're in the context of a job. We're in job 2. We can see that. And we've got this task list, or sorry, a document list here that we call an index. Okay, so this title column, this is my requirement, my required documents. This document instance column, these are the actual documents that have been produced against those requirements. Okay, so what this lets you do, and you'll see how we automate some of this using part categories in a few minutes here, is when I create a new job now, or I create a new job or a repeat job, we can bring these templates in automatically for based on the nature of that job and what the requirements should be. Okay, so I don't have to recreate these line items every time. See, I can even change my index here. I might have different templates in the system. I might have something that's just very basic, balloon drawing, FAI report, lot inspection report, or I might have a new part or repeat part PPAP index, right? So these are some stock ones that we have that come with the system that you can get started with. But typically there's some configuration that we do during the onboarding or implementation phase to kind of sit with you and decide and map out, okay, this is the types of parts that you work on. This is how they flow through your organization. These are the different index checklists that you'll need, and so on. And we kind of configure and build the different components that you'll need. Okay, so all this is designed to be, if you take nothing else away, configurable and templatizable. Okay, so when I have this document checklist here, and these are the actual documents that I run against them. When we're talking about documents, we're not just talking about PDFs or Excel documents, right? We're talking about actual embedded documentation. So if I look at this part submission warrant, for example, this is something that you couldn't really do with Inspection Manager before. If you're just going to output a report to an Excel form, okay, I guess you can make a report that looks like this, but there's only so much data that we can apply to it, and then you have to use it, run it through Excel to manage it the rest of the way. But with this is almost like a mini app inside of the system. Okay, so see how there's yellow fields here? Yellow means that I can interact with it. So I can have text fields here. I can have checkboxes. I can have drop-down fields that are, well, this is a specific date field, not just a drop-down field. But I could also have drop-down fields that have predefined options to them, right? We can even have, if you look down here, there's a broader description field that's multi-line instead of single-line text, and even electronic signatures, okay? So if there's any medical companies on board during the call, I'll preempt an obvious question here is, but this electronic signature process is designed to, from day one, be compliant with 13485 and CFR Part 11 electronic signature requirements. Okay, so we know that this is a huge need in the medical industry, so that was a requirement day one for these forms. Okay, so what this lets you do now, this document right now, this part submission warrant, it's in a draft state. Okay, so I can look up here and I can see the status, it's in draft. I can also see that back on the index, right? I can look at my whole list of documents and see what stage they're in, okay? Now, beyond just the technical details, let's make sure we're mapping all of this, the value appropriately, right? Is today, what most manufacturers are doing is managing all these reports through share folders spread out on the network. Maybe they're organized really, really well, but at at the end of the day, no matter how well you organize your files and share folders, you still, in order to know the status of a particular document or a job in all of its documents, you have to go into those files to actually see where it is. At best, you have maybe some master checklist at the top that lets you manage that, but it's all quite manual, right? So this ties all of that documentation into one cohesive ecosystem, or platform, I should say. So I can go into any job and very quickly see these are all in draft state. Some might be in review, some might be completed, right? Hopefully more are completed than are in draft. That's always good. Some might be waiting on signatures. So at any time, I can see what status or what stage the document is in. And I can also know who's responsible for it, right? So I can go to the workflow and see, oh, okay, see, in this case, it's just the user, but I might have specific users assigned to each stage, okay, of the process. And so at each stage, you have action steps. In this case, it's a very, very simple workflow of just draft, then complete. So at the minimum, this is kind of the minimum that you would have, because you produce it as a draft, you review the content, you fill out your yellow fields, and then you click up at the top to approve it. All right, so here, I'm gonna set myself up as appointed here because I'm a system admin, I can do that. And you'll see now once I go into that, here, let's see. There we go. Okay, so here I mentioned an early release. So, but I do have the approve button up here in the menu. So as you, there we go. So the report now, because it's something that I'm assigned to, I have this option to approve the workflow, and then it'll advance to the next user that's assigned to the next workflow step. Okay. And so these workflow steps might be multifaceted and they go from draft to review to electronic signature. You might need one signature, you might need multiple signatures. These workflows are also items that we can configure based on your business logic and how these documents need to flow through your organization. Okay. So there's a lot of things to kind of think about and kind of take a step back and go, oh man, well, I have all this power in a system like this, all this ability to configure and to build different templates. So one of the questions within that might be, okay, well, how do you even get started on something like this, right? So we've been working a lot over the last year with the companies that have come on as early adopters, and they kind of proved the system out with us. We took tons and tons of feedback over the last year and kind of built it in, and we've put a lot of concerted effort even into our onboarding practices too, to make sure that we're becoming highly proficient at helping you guys be successful with these tools, because this is not something that you can just plug into your organization and just set up and you're running in 2 days, right? This takes time. There's changeover for your standard operating procedures and everything. So we kind of work with you to map all of this stuff out. We have best practices that we've collected from a number of companies that we've worked with, and we're there to help you and guide you through this process. And it's over time, we've seen the benefits of that effort that we've put into it, where the implementations are getting easier and easier for those early adopters. Okay, so just in case that's something that you were thinking about here when you're looking at all of this. All right. Some other things that I want to mention here before we move on to part categories briefly is we did put a pretty substantial focus on the kind of primary PPAP elements here as well. So you'll see there's like gauge R&R here, parts emission warrants, fairly common within, or it's a key part of PPAP, SBC capabilities, and so on. But the three I want to focus on for a second here are PFlow, FMEA, and control plans. So PFlows, right, are a tool for mapping out that overall process flow, right? So we have standard templates that are part of the AIAG standard that we've built into the system, okay? And there's different standards that we're building core templates for as well. Some of them, we have some AS9145 templates already. We're working on some items for medical and automotive as well right now. Okay, so we can build them, we can kind of configure them per customer as we go along during the onboarding process, but we are looking to have kind of complete pack, like starter kits for the different standards that are out there. Okay, so something to think about. But this PFlow, what it's doing is connecting to the drawing, right? I don't have to build this from scratch. I already ballooned the drawing, I defined some operation steps. It syncs all that data forward, right? So we don't have to redundantly input anything. Okay, so it syncs that data forward into my PFlow, and I can fill out my additional information as needed. Okay, and then the big part is the FMEAs here. Okay, so FMEAs are historically, and rightly so, quite burdensome to a lot of companies that are trying to manage them, put them together. And one of the big concepts here that I want to emphasize is that the way that we deal with FMEAs here, we templatize all the content. We make them much easier to populate and fill out because we have a whole process library. A little short on time, so well, yeah, we'll show it really briefly here. There's a process library that manages all of your templatized FMEA content at a system level. Okay, so you can say, these are all my processes that I run throughout my organization, throughout my manufacturing processes. And each one of them has kind of standard failure modes. Okay, so you can define those standard failure modes, right? Their severity, occurrence, detection at a system template level. So you've now standardized this across your organization. So no matter who's filling out FMEAs, they all are pulling from the same source content. This is a huge, huge step forward for continuous improvement managers who are trying to establish baselines for process definition and then incrementally improve it over time, right? This gives you a tool to develop that baseline, okay? And so if we go back to the job level and we look at that FMEA, one of the kind of positive consequences of this, one of the outcomes or benefits, I should say, is by making these FMEAs substantially easier to build, because when I generate this, it just says, okay, which operations, and then these are the standard failure modes and effects and so on for those operations. And then you can modify these at the local level from there. But because they're so much easier to build, it's way less time consuming. And because it's connected in with all of the other aspects of your quality inspections, the actual result data that's coming in, the inspection plan, and so on, you can now actually use an FMEA or a control plan per its original intent, right? So many companies that fill out FMEAs are really focused on the compliance aspect of this, of, oh, my customer requires me to fill out a PFLO, fill out an FMEA, fill out a control plan, so I just do it, right? So you're trying to just copy paste from other FMEAs you've built in the past. The first couple of ones were torture, and then it gets easier after that, right? Because you're just doing a lot of copy and paste, but you're complying when you do that, but you're not necessarily getting substantial value out of these tools. These tools had purpose behind them when they were designed and kind of standardized by AIAG and some of the top OEMs that are out there in the various automotive or aerospace industries, right? And the intent is that you're actually estimating, you're planning for risks and downsides, and you are analyzing your performance through data, actual data, to identify trends and kind of optimize your processes going forward. So we're really excited about what this is going to do for the industry overall. We're starting to hear some really positive feedback that companies are able to manage their processes and control and improve their processes in ways that weren't really possible before. Okay. So, all right, so wanted to hit on those. not sure how many people on the call are working with FMEAs. Could be all of you, could be 3 of you. I don't know. But if you are working with FMEAs, this is a transformational tool, and we'd love to talk to you more about that. Okay, so the last piece I want to talk to you guys about here today is the part categories concept. So part categories was initially conceived because of really what we did with PQP here, where you don't want to have to choose your index template every single time you run a part. You don't want to have to necessarily run all these documents one by one whenever you run a part. It'd be nice to be able to templatize this setup here so that when you run a part, you can just say, oh, I want this set of documents, and just boom, run them all automatically. Okay, because here, and let me just make one of these points clear here, is that because these are electronic documents that are built into the system, they're almost like applications. You can reload them whenever you want. So you, like, say for example, you have like your AS9102, an FAI report, or a lot inspection report, or a process capability study. Maybe you don't have all the inspection result data yet. You can still run the report at the beginning of the job. You can preload all of your documents. And then once you have the actual data set, just come in and you click reload. You don't have to do a lot of thinking about which template to pull or what parameters to set on it or anything like that. You just reload, make sure the data is good, you can review, and then submit it for approval. Okay. So huge deal there. And so the way we do that, here, let's gonna go back to the beginning here to understand how part categories are working. So we've built this new tool called New from Wizard. Okay. So when we say New from Wizard, you get to choose, instead of just bringing a file in, because traditionally what we've done is you just go find a file, you import it, and then you start building your part information. But with this, it's more of a managed approach where we say, okay, pick the part category that you're gonna go off of, right? And so you can have part categories, a whole huge list. I just have a couple in here for today, but you can have a massive list of however many categories you would want. And we'll show this in just a second, what's actually involved in that part category. But that part category contains all the settings and preferences and such that I want for this part. Then I fill in my part number, right? I fill in my rev, fill in my name, and units and such, right? And so once I do that, and then I go and I pick my drawing, now all of my settings and preferences come in automatically. Okay, so let's take a look at what those settings and preferences are. We're gonna go up here to our part categories. Oop, there we go. So if we look at it, so this is where I can build my hierarchy of categories, right? All of my templates, so I can add them in here. And I can even categorize and arrange them, because we know that customers are going to come up with all sorts of different ways to arrange these settings and preferences and such. It might be by the type of part, like machined parts have a certain are a part category versus assembled parts versus plastic or what have you. Like it could be all sorts of different criteria that you define. But you would define that criteria, that template of settings, and you would go to category setup, and you've got general settings that can be applied here. Okay. You have part settings, so you can say it's this type of units, they use these decimal tables, it's part of this project, they use this material template. A material template is like the raw materials or special processes and such. You can have a whole group of those that get pulled in automatically. You can define how your tolerances are managed, how your units are managed, and your sampling rules are all managed within this category. Okay. So again, think about creating a new part. All this stuff is set up for me. I don't just have one set of global settings to define all this. I can vary all of these settings when creating new parts, even my target CPK, PPK. And then the PQP, that's the original reason that we were talking about this, right? Is that I can say, this is the index that you pull in for this category. This is the default workflow for the different documents. and then you can select these are all of my specific documents that I want to pull in. So you might have for a particular customer, okay, these are all the report templates for that customer. So you define all those here. And you say auto create those so that when you create the new part, you create repeat jobs. All of those documents get pre-run, and there's way less clicking, way less decision making that you have to do on the fly in order to run all of those documents. And so when they run, they get assigned to their workflows and such, so they're auto assigned to the appropriate users throughout the company as well. Okay, so everybody has their task lists that are populating as efficiently as they possibly can do. Okay. All right, so that's a lot of big concepts that we tried to kind of pack down into 45 minutes for you guys. Obviously, there's a lot of depth to that. There's a lot of questions that come out of it about various scenarios and how they get handled. I assure you, we have thought about the vast majority of them. We have accounted for the vast majority of them. So if there's any questions that anybody has, we can take the last few minutes of the webinar session here to address those questions.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Chris, for sharing your expertise. As you mentioned, now is the time where you can ask your questions. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A chat box, and you can type your question right on in there. In the meantime, we did have a couple of questions come in. The first one says, how long does it take to get trained on HiQA software?
That's a good question. So the answer is it varies. It depends on which aspects of the system you're trying to implement, and how big of a company you're trying to incorporate it into. But typically, there's phases that we map out, and we have as I alluded to before, we have a very sophisticated implementation and onboarding process, and we know how to kind of categorize and profile companies to get them down the right path. So one thing that we really try to achieve during onboarding is helping you get incremental value as quickly as possible. And so we break up the onboarding into phases where you start with, let's say, the ballooning and building out the raw inspection plans, right? You can get up and running with that in like 2-3 weeks or so. Depends on how sophisticated your process is. It's 2-3 hours of training and you're off and running on the ballooning side. But when you start incorporating kind of like the data collection for across the shop floor or in QC, you're tying in the CMMs, and you're doing like the PQP concept of document management and all that stuff. That's where we sit with you and do more of the process review and map everything out of how it's going to go, which team's got to be trained. So I guess the short way to put it is typically somewhere between, if you're going to go full system, somewhere between 3 to 6 months to get the full system up and running. And every month or two, you're releasing certain phases of the environment to have it go live, and you're getting value from those phases.
Okay, great. So a couple of people are asking about the interaction with Minitab, for example.
Yep. So there's 2 possible answers to that, 2 ways that you can go. So we can we can take over a good chunk of the reporting and calculations that are being done within Minitab. So we have all the data, and we have the all of the reports, even a lot of our standard reports are designed to go after some of the common ones that Minitab that users use within Minitab. But if there are some specific reports that you like within Minitab, or we know there's some companies that are like required to use it per their customer, we can absolutely supply data outputs that you can crunch in Minitab, and then you just attach the report into back into high QA after the fact. And that way all of your documentation and such is managed in one place. Okay, so a couple different approaches to it.
Chris, can you see the Q&A tab
Yes, I
if you
can.
click on it?
Yep.
Okay, there are two questions by Bernie, if you can relate to them. One is in the public Q&A, one is in the chat. They are both related to the tabulated.
Got it. All right, so Barney was asking about tabulated and set of drills. Example. Yeah, so it looks like Barney's asking for a specific type of tabulated drawing, which, yeah, I think we can absolutely do like a one-on-one demo to assess that. Just reading the question real quick here. Yeah, I think everything that Barney is kind of asking about, he's more or less bringing up a lot of really good points about how this the tabulated drawings is fantastic when it comes to new part introductions and so on, for evaluating new parts and trying to determine I don't know if he's looking at that for like quoting opportunities and such, or what have you, but yeah, definitely the efficiency in building out the inspection plans and being able to see what what kind of complexity is involved is a big deal on that front. So, yep, it sounds like we should probably set up a demo specifically with Barney to go over his questions there.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris.
Everyone can see the question. I will answer also some of it by typing as well. Okay.
Okay.
Look at the question that Steve posted.
Yeah, I'm looking at that one.
Okay.
Yes. So Steve, that's a really good question. Steve asked, does this have any functionality for traceability, serialization, and ability to produce a CFC with supporting data? Yes, absolutely. So when it comes to traceability, yes, you can have, we have detailed sample planning that we can do, and that can be serialized sample planning. And so all the data collection that we do is done by serial number. So it doesn't have to be, but for companies that need serialization, then we absolutely track all of that. And we even have some really cool tools that came out back in September for tracking like the specific machine centers or manufacturing equipment that was responsible for making each serial number. So there's some really cool tools on that front as well. Also, with regard to CFCs, that's a really important aspect of PQP and how it's designed. So I didn't touch on this too much in this session, but when you're planning for your inspections, you're also planning for your material and special process requirements, right? And so what certs you need and so on to track. And so that gets incorporated into your index, so your documentation requirements, and it's assigned to whoever you need those tasks assigned to in the organization to upload the material certs and the special process certs, and then those get tracked. They can go through approval stages if need be, or they can just be marked as done right off the bat, and then they're rolled into the overall submission package to your customer if that's what your customer is requiring from you. We can also make forms for your internal CFCs. If you need to provide CFCs to your customer for the work that you're doing, we can replicate those forms in our system. We do that for the majority of our customers that come on board. That's a pretty common need. So, and we can pre-populate the form with as much data as we have in the database. So things like, we obviously know the part number, the job number, like the raw materials and so on that it's made from. You can have any kind of a custom format that you need there, and then have all the yellow fields to fill in the details and sign it. Yep.
Great.
Steve.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
It looks like that's it for the questions that have come in thus far. If anyone has any questions that come to mind later on, feel free to reach out to us. Chris, if you want to flip over to that final screen, we'll go ahead and put our contact information up there for you. So again, feel free to reach out to us at any time. Thanks again, Chris, for giving us all of this great information, and thank you to the audience for joining us for the hour. We hope you found it valuable, and enjoy the rest of your day. I will be sending this recording out shortly. Thanks so much, everyone.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.